The sound of the fork clinking against the ceramic plate should have been ordinary, familiar. But that morning, it rang out like a warning bell in a church before a funeral. Emily was stirring her scrambled eggs without taking a bite, her face unreadable, her lips pressed into a nervous line. I sat across from her, holding a mug of lukewarm coffee, bleary-eyed from another night spent tossing and turning. Her silence had already said more than any words could. And yet, I still wasn't ready when they came. "I just need some space," she said, her voice soft and detached, like she was commenting on the weather. "To be single for a while. Figure myself out." The coffee in my mouth turned bitter as it hit my tongue. I swallowed hard and blinked at her. "Single," I repeated, like maybe I didn't understand the word. "Like not married?" "No." She set her fork down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the plate. "I'm not talking about a divorce. Just a pause." "A pause," I said slowly, letting the word hang between us like a loaded gun on the table. "Is that a thing now?" She had the decency to flinch a little at that, but she didn't backpedal. "I'm not saying I don't love you, Nick. There's this part of me that feels like it got buried under all of this. The house, the routines, us. I need time to breathe." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized how far away she already seemed. She wore one of my favorite shirts on her, the light green button-down that brought out the flecks in her eyes. But there was no softness in her gaze now, no warmth. Just quiet resignation. I should have yelled, should have demanded an explanation. But the thing was, I was too tired to fight, too numbed by months of her pulling away. The sex had faded to once every few weeks, and when it happened, it was brief, distant, mechanical. Her moans felt rehearsed. Her hands never lingered. I leaned back in my chair and forced a breath out of my lungs. "So what happens now?" I asked. She shrugged. "We take some time. You stay here if you want. I'll crash at Rachel's place for a bit." Of course, Rachel, her younger sister. The artist, the free spirit. Always between apartments and somehow always landing on her feet. The polar opposite of Emily's perfectionism. I didn't ask the obvious question. Was this about someone else? Some guy she met at yoga, or work, or the cafe she suddenly loved. The idea twisted in my gut, but I kept it buried. For now. Instead, I nodded slowly. "Okay." Emily blinked, startled. She expected resistance. Maybe even wanted it. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I just stood up, took my plate to the sink, and turned the water on without saying another word. That night, I stayed up alone in the living room, nursing a glass of whiskey and watching the blue glow of the TV flicker across the walls. I wasn't really watching anything. I just needed noise. Anything to drown out the silence of the empty bedroom. I thought about our first apartment, that shoebox over a bodega in Brooklyn where we'd fucked on every surface and laughed about how poor we were. I thought about the way she used to wrap her legs around me and whisper things she'd never say out loud in daylight. God, she was fire back then. A little reckless. A little wild. I was addicted to her. But slowly, over time, she became polished, responsible, controlled. And somewhere along the line, we stopped touching just to touch. Stopped kissing just because. And I didn't even notice it happening until it was already gone. I finished my drink and stared at the ceiling. The bed felt too big. The house felt too clean. And I felt invisible. The following days were a blur of pretending. I went to work, sat through meetings, answered emails. Smiled when people asked how I was. Hanging in there, I'd say. The default male script. At night, I'd scroll through old photos on my phone. One caught my attention. Emily in a sundress, barefoot in the grass, looking over her shoulder and laughing as I snapped the shot. That smile didn't exist anymore. Not for me. I hated that I still wanted her. That I still got hard thinking about the way she used to sneak up behind me in the shower, wet and eager, biting my neck and pressing her hips against me. She hadn't done that in years. The last time we had sex, really had sex, not the obligatory married version, had been maybe 7 months ago. She'd surprised me after a dinner party, pulled me into the guest bathroom and rode me in silence, her eyes locked on mine. No words, just heat. Afterward, she left first and rejoined the party without looking back. I remember standing there alone, pants barely zipped, wondering if it meant something or nothing at all. Turns out it meant nothing. By the third night, the isolation started to gnaw at me. I called a friend, lied and said I was fine. Ordered takeout, didn't finish it. I found myself looking out the front window every time a car passed, half hoping it was her. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she realized she missed me. But she didn't, and I didn't even know if I missed her, or just the idea of her. The woman she used to be. The one who used to text me at work, "I'm not wearing underwear. Come home for lunch." The woman who used to giggle when I touched her under the table at family dinners. Now I was just the man she needed space from. On the fifth night, I finally went upstairs and stood in the middle of our bedroom. Her side of the closet was still full, but the scent of her was fading. The lavender lotion, the shampoo, all of it being replaced by nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed and picked up her pillow, squeezing it like a man desperate for something real. Something that felt like home. That's when the tears came. Quiet, pitiful things. I didn't sob or wail. Just sat there and let the warm streaks run down my face. Because she wasn't coming back. Not really. And even if she did, I wasn't sure I'd be able to let her in again. The knock at the door came at the worst possible time. I hadn't showered in 2 days. I was wearing the same hoodie I'd spilled whiskey on the night before, and my living room smelled like pizza crust and man regret. I figured it was a delivery guy with the wrong address, or maybe one of the neighbors asking me to move my car from their driveway again. I opened the door with zero intention of small talk, but it wasn't a stranger. It was Rachel, Emily's sister, and she was holding a six-pack in one hand and a giant bag of Thai takeout in the other. "Jesus," she said, taking in the mess that was me. "You look like a sad hoodie commercial." I blinked. What are you doing here?" She pushed past me without waiting for an invite, kicking off her boots at the door like she still lived here. "Heard from Mom that Em's on some kind of eat, pray, ghost her husband journey, so I figured I'd check in on you. You weren't answering your phone." I closed the door behind her, slow and dumbfounded. "I didn't even know you were in town. Got tired of crashing at the Rents. They still have a VCR and think Wi-Fi is a government conspiracy. Plus," she turned, her eyes meeting mine, "I was curious about how you were holding up." I glanced around the disaster zone that was the house. Pillows on the floor, unopened mail on the counter, dishes in the sink. "Clearly thriving," I muttered. She grinned, setting the food on the table. "Good. Then you've reached the I don't give a shit anymore phase. That's healthy. Tragic, but healthy." Rachel had always been the opposite of Emily. Where my wife was calculated, polished, and obsessed with planning, Rachel was the definition of chaos wrapped in sarcasm. She wore a worn leather jacket over a faded band tee, and her dark hair was messy in that perfectly accidental way. She looked like trouble, the kind of trouble I used to chase before I met Emily. I hadn't seen her in over a year. Last I heard, she was taking time to find herself, which was code for breaking up with some guy and crashing at her parents' house rent-free. She cracked open a beer, handed it to me. "You still drink this garbage?" "I like what I know," I said, sipping it anyway. Spoken like a man freshly dumped. I gave her a sideways glance. She didn't dump me. It's a break. Rachel raised a brow. "MMM. And how's that fiction working out for you?" I didn't answer. She didn't press it. We sat down with the food, eating in silence for a while. It felt bizarrely natural, like we were back in our 20s, scrounging leftovers after a late concert. She cracked jokes between bites of drunken noodles, and I laughed more in that half hour than I had all week. At one point, she caught me staring a beat too long. "What?" she asked, licking peanut sauce off her thumb. I shrugged. "You've changed. Better or worse?" "Different," I said honestly. "More grounded." She snorted. "I'm literally homeless, Nick. Don't mistake temporary homelessness for spiritual enlightenment." We finished the meal and moved to the couch, nursing another round of beers. Her legs curled beneath her, and she tugged my old throw blanket around her shoulders like she belonged there. It felt dangerous, familiar, like lighting a match near dry kindling. "Do you miss her?" Rachel asked suddenly. I didn't answer right away. "I miss who she used to be. Not this version." She nodded, like she understood exactly what I meant. "I miss parts of her too," she said quietly, before she turned everything into a performance. I glanced at her. "You two were close once." "Yeah," she said. But somewhere along the way, she started managing everyone around her like a PR firm. I never fit into that. We sat in the stillness that followed her words. I could feel her watching me, but I didn't look at her. Couldn't. Eventually, she stretched her arms over her head and let out a long sigh. "You know what you need? Enlighten me. A break from the break." I turned to her. That sounds like the setup to a bad decision. She smirked. Probably. But hear me out. Dad still has the cabin up near Lake Kessler. You remember it? No cell signal. No internet. Just trees, whiskey, and maybe a radio that still plays bad country. I blinked. That place still exists. Oh yeah, she said. And I have the keys. Told Dad I might head up there for a weekend to reset after the whole Travis thing. I raised a brow. Travis? Ex-boyfriend. Slept with my roommate. Long story. Ends with a broken coffee mug and me crying into a quesadilla. Sounds messy. That's my genre. She leaned forward, her eyes catching mine. Come with me. I laughed, unsure if she was joking. To a cabin? Just you and me? Rachel shrugged. What? You afraid of the woods now? You need air, Nick. Real air. Not this beer and bitterness cloud you've wrapped around yourself. I opened my mouth to protest, to list all the reasons why running off to a cabin with my wife's sister was a very bad idea. But none of the reasons felt convincing. Not even to me. She saw the hesitation in my face and pounced. We won't talk about Emily. We won't talk about feelings. Just two ex-humans trying to remember what it feels like to breathe. I leaned back, exhaling. When would we leave? Her grin widened. Tomorrow. Early. I've already got gas in the car and 2 sleeping bags in the trunk. And if you say no, I'm kidnapping you anyway. I rolled my eyes. You're insane. Yup. I stared at her, weighing the weightlessness she offered. And then I said, fine. She clapped once. Yes. The sad hoodie man is taking a field trip. And just like that, I said yes to the thing I hadn't known I needed. The road twisted like a lazy snake through the mountains, the pines thickening with every mile. Rachel had one arm hanging out the passenger window, fingers slicing through the wind like she was conducting some invisible orchestra. Her boots were on the dashboard. She hadn't stopped humming since we left the gas station an hour ago. You good over there, Thoreau? I asked. She turned, grinning. Better. You're driving, and I'm not hungover, which is a rare combo. This trip already feels like a good call. I offered a non-committal grunt, eyes back on the road. It had taken everything in me not to text Emily before we left. Something instinctive, polite, like heading out of town, be back in a few days. But that felt ridiculous. She was the one who asked for space. I figured disappearing into the trees for a while was finally giving her what she wanted. The tires crunched gravel as we reached the turnoff. A battered wooden sign barely visible through the brush read, Kessler Ridge, 2. For miles. We bumped along the dirt path, branches clawing at the sides of Rachel's beat-up Subaru like they wanted to keep us out. This place hasn't changed a bit, she said, sitting up straighter, her voice almost reverent. I used to sneak cigarettes out here when I was 15. Thought Dad didn't know. I laughed. He knew. She gave me a playful shove. Liar. Nope. He told me once while we were stacking wood. Said, Rachel's sneaky, but she doesn't realize her smoke floats through the trees like a damn fog machine. Rachel groaned. God, I was so cool. The cabin appeared just as I remembered, small, unpainted, with a tilted porch and moss creeping up one side. The kind of place where time stalled and you couldn't be reached unless someone physically showed up. I parked beside an old stump and killed the engine. The silence wrapped around us immediately. Home sweet dysfunctional home, Rachel said, hopping out. Inside, the air smelled like cedar and old fire. Dust hung in the light like lazy snow. We spent the first hour sweeping out cobwebs, stacking logs near the fireplace, and arguing about who would sleep where. I'll take the couch, I offered. She tilted her head. You sure? Yeah. She didn't argue, just gave me a short nod and tossed her duffel on the creaky bed in the back room. By late afternoon, we'd unpacked, restocked the shelves with canned goods, and built a fire that spat sparks into the fading daylight. I stood at the edge of the porch, watching the light bleed gold across the treetops. You look like a man about to write poetry, Rachel said, stepping up beside me with 2 beers in hand. I took one and clinked the glass against hers. I'm just thinking. Dangerous pastime. We drank in silence for a while. Something about the way the woods swallowed sound made it feel like the world had shrunk to just the 2 of us and the endless quiet. She leaned against the railing. You ever think about just not going back? I looked at her. To what? To all of it. Work. Expectations. People who say they love you but then vanish the second they get bored. Her voice was casual, but there was something sharp under it. Talking about Travis again? Among others, she said. I've got a whole playlist of disappointments. He's just the most recent track. I didn't press. The fire popped behind us, the only response necessary. We cooked dinner over the old gas stove, canned chili with too much hot sauce and a pan of baked beans that we burned slightly, which somehow made it taste better. We sat on the floor and ate by firelight, Rachel's bare feet tucked beneath her as she told me a story about nearly being arrested for accidental trespassing during a camping trip in Utah. Her eyes lit up when she talked. Animated. Free. I'd never noticed that before. I'd always seen Rachel as the wild sibling. The one who couldn't hold down a job, couldn't keep a boyfriend, couldn't stay in one place for long. But sitting there, laughing with a mouthful of beans, she didn't seem lost. She seemed alive. And somewhere in the middle of her story, as she mimed scaling a fence and swearing at a park ranger, I caught myself watching the curve of her lips more than the words coming out of them. That realization hit hard. Shit, Nick. I stood too quickly, brushing crumbs off my jeans. I'll grab more wood. Already? She asked, looking amused. Yeah, might get cold later. She let me go without comment, but I could feel her eyes on my back as I stepped out into the night air. The woods were quiet, humming with distant life. I crouched near the woodpile, letting my heartbeat settle. I wasn't supposed to notice her. Not like that. Not Rachel. But it wasn't about sex. Not really. It was the way she looked at me. Like I still existed. Like I hadn't been fading for months under someone else's indifference. When I returned, she was curled up on the couch, blanket wrapped around her like a cocoon, face lit only by the fire. Hey, she said quietly. You okay? I nodded, dropping the wood beside the hearth. She patted the floor beside her. Sit. You look like your brain's overheating. I obeyed, more out of exhaustion than anything else. She handed me another beer. Our knees brushed as we sat. For the rest of the night, we didn't talk much. Just watched the flames dance, letting them do all the speaking for us. Somewhere deep into the evening, I glanced at her again, her head tilted back, eyes half-lidded, lips parted just slightly. There was something sensual about the moment, in the same way heat slowly builds before a thunderstorm. Neither of us moved, but something had shifted, and we both felt it. The rain started just after dawn, gentle at first, a lazy tapping on the cabin roof like nature hadn't made up its mind yet. I woke up stiff, cold, and cocooned in two old quilts on the sagging couch. The fire had gone out sometime during the night, and the room was heavy with morning silence. Then I heard her, Rachel, humming. She was in the kitchen, barefoot in a tank top and pajama shorts, boiling water on the stove and swaying like she'd forgotten anyone else existed. Her hair was twisted up in a lazy knot, a single lock dangling over her shoulder, catching the light in a way that made my gut tighten. I watched from the couch, still half draped in wool, trying to convince myself that what I was feeling was innocent. It wasn't. She turned and caught me watching her, offering a sleepy smile. Morning, couch goblin. You want coffee? God, yes, I croaked. She poured 2 mugs and patted over, curling into the armchair across from me. Her legs folded up beneath her, and I had to force my eyes to stay above her collarbone. The fabric of her tank clung to her in ways I didn't want to notice. Looks like we're stuck in today, she said, nodding toward the window. The trees were soaked, rain coming down in steady sheets now. No hikes, no fishing, I muttered. Damn shame. She grinned. Guess we'll have to entertain ourselves indoors. The air between us went still. Don't read into that, I told myself. But her gaze lingered a second too long before she sipped her coffee. We spent the morning doing small things, reading, playing cards, pretending not to be completely aware of the tension threading through the room. Around noon, I stripped off my hoodie and moved another log into the fire, trying to get some heat into the place. My shirt stuck to my back, damp with sweat and sleep. You're gonna regret that, Rachel said, eyeing the firewood I was stacking. Why? That's wet pine. It's gonna smoke like hell. She was right. 10 minutes later, the cabin smelled like scorched bark, and the smoke alarm let out a pitiful chirp before dying completely. Rachel coughed, waving smoke from her face. Okay, that's it. Time for a shower. She vanished down the hall, and I took the opportunity to open the door and fan out the smoke. Cold air hit me like a slap. I stood there a minute, head fogged with caffeine and the now familiar weight of being near her for too long. Something was shifting between us. I felt it in the small moments. The way her fingers brushed mine when we passed mugs, the warmth in her laughter when we weren't pretending to be fine. It wasn't attraction in the shallow sense. It was recognition, comfort, danger. The bathroom door creaked open. Steam spilled out like fog. Rachel stepped into the hallway wrapped in a towel. Just a towel, skin flushed from the heat. Her collarbones were damp, hair dripping water down her spine. She caught me mid-glance, and instead of blushing or covering up, she raised a brow. "You're up." "Uh-huh. Shower's all yours," she said, stepping past me. Her bare shoulder brushed mine. I froze. She didn't look back. I took the shower because I needed to. For sanity, for heat, for the illusion of cleansing something I couldn't name. I scrubbed harder than necessary, as if I could steam the thoughts out of my skull. When I stepped out, the towel rack was empty. "Rachel," I called, cracking the door open. She was already dressed, thankfully, in black leggings and a thick sweater. "Towels are in the cupboard by the fireplace," she said casually, not even looking up from the book in her lap. I shuffled through the cabin wrapped in a blanket like a penitentiary monk until I found a towel. Dried off. Got dressed in clean clothes that didn't smell like firewood and guilt. Back in the living room, she'd cleared a space near the hearth and laid out a deck of cards. "Gin rummy," she offered. "Loser has to make dinner. I don't remember how to play." "Perfect. Then I'll definitely win." The next hour blurred into lazy banter and the kind of flirting that didn't quite know what it wanted to be. She teased me every time I lost, grinning over her cards like she was 17 again. And I just watched her. Her knee touched mine beneath the table. We didn't move apart. "You always were kind of hot," she said out of nowhere, not looking up from her hand. I blinked. "What?" She smirked, eyes flicking to mine. "Relax. I mean it in a general sense. Emily always said you were too serious, but I like that about you." Not sure if that's a compliment. "It is," she said, softer now. I always wondered what it would be like to be seen by someone who didn't expect me to perform. I set my cards down. "You don't have to perform around me." She leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "You're the first one who ever made me feel like that." My chest tightened. I should have pulled away. Should have changed the subject. But I didn't. Her hand grazed mine. My thumb found the edge of her fingers and stayed there. We sat like that for maybe a full minute. Close. Still. Breathing. The fire crackled, and thunder rolled low in the distance. Rachel finally stood, slowly, smoothing her sweater down. "I'm gonna grab some more wine," she said, voice uneven. I watched her disappear into the kitchen, heart pounding like I'd run a mile. I hadn't touched her. Not really. But the air between us was scorched, charged. A thread pulled taut and ready to snap. And I wasn't sure how much longer we could pretend we didn't feel it. The next morning broke warm and foggy, sunlight bleeding through the trees in long golden streaks. The rain had stopped sometime in the night, but the air still clung to everything like breath on glass. The cabin windows fogged at the corners, and somewhere in the woods, a bird gave a low, broken whistle like a secret trying to escape. Rachel was already up, sitting barefoot on the porch steps, her sweater hanging loose off one shoulder. She had a cup of coffee in her hands, the steam curling around her face like smoke. She looked peaceful, untouchable. I stepped out quietly, coffee in hand, unsure if she'd say anything about what had almost happened the night before, about the cards, the lingering touch, the static between us that neither of us wanted to name. She didn't turn around, just patted the space beside her on the step. I sat down. For a while, we just drank in silence, watching the mist roll through the pines like some old god waking up. Finally, she spoke. "Do you remember that summer your car broke down on our way to that family lake trip?" I chuckled. "Yeah, Dad blamed me for taking the long way." "You weren't driving. Didn't matter." She smiled, eyes distant. "I remember that stop we made somewhere outside of Reading. You bought me ice cream. I was, 17? Sounds right. You sat with me on that hot curb while everyone else argued inside the gas station. You talked to me like I mattered. Not like a kid. Not like your wife's little sister." "I didn't think you remembered that." "I do," she said. "You made me feel seen, Nick. You always have." I turned toward her, but she was already getting to her feet. "Come on," she said. "Put that coffee down. You're going swimming." I blinked. "Swimming? It's not even 60 degrees." She grinned, wicked and daring. "Stop being such a grown-up." The lake was maybe a mile hike through the trees. Still glass, ringed by reeds. untouched by anyone but deer and wind. Rachel dropped her clothes on the rocks without ceremony, revealing the black bikini beneath, and walked barefoot into the shallows like it was a holy ritual. "Coming or what?" she called over her shoulder. I hesitated. I didn't bring a suit. "So?" She turned, arms raised, grinning like trouble. "You wouldn't," I said. She raised one brow, then untied her top and let it fall into the water. I stared, stunned, heartbeat like a bass drum in my chest. Her breasts were pale and perfect, her nipples already taut from the cool air. She stood ankle-deep, hands on her hips, the water barely reaching her thighs. "Your move," she said. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The rational part of me screamed, "Don't do it," but the rest of me, the hurt, the lonely, the man, he moved. I peeled off my shirt, then my jeans, then everything else, and I followed her into the lake. The water hit like ice, stealing the breath from my lungs. Rachel shrieked and laughed, splashing at me as I waded deeper. We swam until our limbs ached and the sun had climbed above the treetops. We played like kids. We flirted like strangers. And when we finally dragged ourselves back to the shore, breathless and dripping, she grabbed my hand and pulled me onto the blanket we'd left on the rocks. She lay beside me, chest heaving, her body glistening in the light. "That," she whispered, "was the most alive I've felt in months." "Yeah," I said. "Me too." Our fingers stayed linked. She turned her head to me, eyes unreadable. Her hair clung to her face, damp and wild, and the sun made her skin glow. And then she kissed me. Soft at first, just lips brushing, testing, asking. I didn't stop her. My hand slid to her hip. She moved closer, pressing her chest to mine, moaning lightly as our mouths opened, and everything we'd been holding back came rushing out in one aching, breathless exchange. We kissed until we were gasping, until our hands were no longer tentative, until every line we hadn't meant to cross was behind us. "Nick," she whispered into my neck, "we don't have to think about anything else right now. Just this. Just here." She pushed me back onto the blanket, straddling me, her thighs warm and slick against mine. Her towel dropped from her shoulders. I reached up to touch her, and she leaned into it, eyes fluttering shut, biting her lip as my hands explored the curves I had no business touching. We didn't speak as we moved. There was no need. She sank down onto me slowly, deliberately, like she wanted to feel every inch. Her hands braced on my chest, her eyes locked with mine, her breath catching as we became something new. The rhythm started slow, aching, intimate, like we were memorizing each other with every thrust. Her nails dug into my chest. My hands gripped her waist. The blanket bunched beneath us. The air around us buzzed with heat and wrongness and need. When she came, she cried out my name. Not a whisper, not a mistake, a declaration. I followed seconds later, the tension ripping through me like lightning. We collapsed in a tangle of limbs, chests heaving, hearts beating too fast. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The lake shimmered in the distance. The sun warmed our cooling skin. Eventually, Rachel rolled onto her side and traced a line down my arm with her finger. "That shouldn't have happened," I said. "I know," she said softly. And yet, neither of us got up. Because somehow, in that moment, the wrong thing had never felt so devastatingly right. I woke to the sound of birds. Not the bright, chirping kind from some happy movie scene. These were low calls, distant and hollow, like they were warning each other of something broken nearby. A forest whispering its secrets. My arm was numb. Rachel lay draped across my chest, her leg tangled in mine, skin warm, breath steady. The fire in the hearth had burned to faint orange coals. A sheet was wrapped loosely around our lower bodies. The rest of us was bare. For a moment, maybe 2 seconds, I let myself enjoy it. Her weight on me, the scent of smoke and skin, the memory of the night before washing back in slow, devastating waves. Then guilt hit like a blow to the chest. I stared at the ceiling. Everything came into sharp, cruel focus. Emily, her voice, her face, her trust, or what was left of it. Her sister. I was in bed with her sister. Rachel stirred, then stilled. She was awake. I could feel it in the way her breathing changed, the way her fingertips twitched against my side. But she didn't move. Neither did I. Finally, she spoke. "You're thinking too loud." I said nothing. She pushed herself up slightly and looked down at me. Her hair was a mess of dark curls, her lips still kiss-swollen. She looked like sin and softness all at once. "I know what you're feeling," she said gently. I felt it too, for a few seconds. Then I remembered something. "What?" She rolled onto her back beside me, staring at the ceiling. "That you're not married right now. Not really. Not in any way that matters." She said it was a break, I murmured. Rachel turned to me. She left. She walked out. She asked for space without considering what it would do to you. I sat up, resting my elbows on my knees. "That doesn't make this okay." She didn't argue. Just let the silence grow between us, thick and uneven. "I didn't plan for this," I added. "I know," she said. "Neither did I." We dressed slowly, each movement echoing like guilt. My clothes still smelled faintly of smoke and lake water. Rachel pulled on an oversized sweater and leggings and tied her hair up without looking in the mirror. She made coffee while I stood uselessly near the fire, feeding it logs like it might burn the night out of existence. When she brought me a mug, our fingers brushed. It was the first touch that didn't feel electric. It felt heavy. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, sipping quietly. She was the first to speak again. "Do you regret it?" I didn't answer right away. Did I? The honest truth was, no. Not in the moment. Not during. Not even after, when her breath was still soft against my neck and her hand rested on my chest like she belonged there. But now, in daylight, with reality creeping in through the cracks, I regretted that it couldn't mean something more, that it had to be tangled in everything else. "I don't regret you," I said finally. Her eyes met mine. "But you regret what it means." "Yeah." She nodded slowly, taking a sip. "I get it," she said. "But you should know. I'm not ashamed of last night. I needed it." Her voice softened. We both needed something real. Something that wasn't filtered through Emily's shadow. That stung more than I expected. "She's still my wife?" I said quietly. Rachel didn't flinch. "Is she, though? Or is she just someone you're still trying to be loyal to out of habit?" I stood abruptly. "I need air." She didn't stop me. The lake was still, smooth as glass, untouched. Our blanket was still there, damp, half crumpled on the rocks where we'd left it. I stared at it for a long time, the memory of her voice echoing in my head. "We don't have to think about anything else right now." But I was thinking about everything. About Emily's cold voice in that kitchen. About the curve of Rachel's hip in the firelight. About the heat and the shame and the terrifying truth that I hadn't felt alive in months. Not until Rachel. I picked up the blanket and shook it out like it might erase the imprint of our bodies. It didn't. By the time I returned to the cabin, Rachel was packing up a backpack with snacks and water. "We should hike," she said, not looking at me. "Get out of our heads." I nodded. It sounded better than sitting here, trying not to touch her again. We walked for hours, a quiet trail that wound through pines and opened occasionally into overlooks where the world felt too wide to carry anything heavy. We didn't speak much, just let the trees listen. Eventually, we stopped on a fallen log overlooking the ridge. I took a swig from the water bottle and passed it to her. She looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone who had lived 2 lifetimes in one weekend. "This doesn't have to ruin everything," she said suddenly. I raised a brow. "I mean," she continued, "what happened it can stay here. If that's what you need." I stared at her, heart sinking. "So you'd be okay pretending it didn't matter?" She gave a sad smile. "No. But I've spent my whole life not being the one who mattered. I'm used to it." My throat tightened. "That's not what I meant." "I know," she said softly. "But you should think about what you do mean, Nick. Before this turns into another silence you carry like luggage." We hiked back in the dusk, our shadows stretching long between us. She walked slightly ahead, hands in her jacket pockets, head down. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words sat heavy on my tongue. I didn't know what we were now. Only that something had changed. And there was no going back. We didn't speak much after we got back from the hike. Rachel dropped her backpack on the table, peeled off her jacket, and went straight to the back room. I heard the old bed springs creak as she collapsed onto the mattress. I stood in the kitchen, staring at a can of beans in my hand, pretending I was hungry when I wasn't. Everything between us felt like glass now, still, beautiful, and one word away from shattering. By the time I got a fire going and reheated the leftover chili, she reappeared. No makeup, hair a mess, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands. She looked younger, sadder. "Dinner," I offered. She nodded. "Thanks." We sat on the floor again, this time on opposite sides of the coffee table. I tried not to watch her too closely. She tried not to seem like she noticed. It was all restraint and pretending, like we were back at the first night. She pushed her spoon around the bowl. You know what the worst part is? What? Knowing it won't be the sex that breaks everything. It's the silence afterward. I blinked. You really believe that? She looked up at me with a faint, tired smile. Of course. Sex is noise. Confusion. It's the quiet that kills people. The things we don't say. I set my bowl aside. You want to say something? She shrugged. Let's play a game. Okay. Confessions, she said. You tell me something you've never told Emily. I'll tell you something I've never told anyone. That's not really a game, I said. Sure it is, she said. Only rule is you have to be honest. I considered it. I was too tired to argue, too wrung out to deflect. So I started. Sometimes, I said, I used to pretend to be asleep when she'd crawl into bed next to me. Not because I was mad. I just didn't want to engage. I didn't want to hear about how her day had gone. I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to rest. And it made me feel like a terrible husband. Rachel nodded like she understood completely. You weren't a terrible husband. I raised a brow. Your turn. She inhaled. I've never had someone stay. I blinked. What do you mean? I mean, every guy I've dated, every person I've tried to connect with, they all leave. Maybe not right away, but eventually. I'm like a spark. Fun, unpredictable, exciting for a while. Then gone. Or forgotten. She looked away. I think I've stopped expecting people to stay. I just wait for the moment they don't. Something in me cracked. I wanted to reach across the table, take her hand, tell her that wasn't how I saw her. But I didn't trust myself to say it without it sounding like another half-promise. So I offered another confession instead. Emily told me she wanted a break 6 days after we had sex, I said. That was the last time. And it wasn't even good. It felt like obligation. Like a goodbye neither of us could say out loud. Rachel's expression didn't change. She just reached for the bottle of wine beside the fire and poured us both a glass. My turn, she said. I once slept with a guy because he said I reminded him of someone he used to love. I think I just wanted to feel like someone worth remembering. She looked up at me. Pathetic, huh? No, I said. Lonely. We drank. Let the confessions spill like slow poison. I used to imagine what it would feel like if she touched me like she wanted to again. I'd sit on the couch with her beside me and think, is this what dying slowly feels like? I tried to be the version of me Emily could like. Polished. Safe. But sometimes I think she married me because I was the opposite of you. Rachel's eyes flicked up, caught mine. Is that what you were? The safe choice? I hesitated. I think I was the dependable one. And she wanted something solid after years of chaos. And now, she asked, now that the dependable one is here with the chaos? I didn't answer. She crawled around the coffee table, slowly, as if waiting for me to stop her. I didn't. She kneeled between my legs, her hand on my thigh, eyes never leaving mine. You're not safe anymore, Nick, she whispered. You're choosing. I reached up, cupped her face, felt her lean into the touch like it was something she'd needed for years. We kissed again, softer this time. Slower. Like neither of us was trying to prove anything. Like this wasn't a mistake. It just was. We made love again, there on the cabin floor, the fire painting shadows across our skin. No blankets. No rush. No regrets. Afterward, she lay in my arms, head on my chest, tracing patterns with her finger over the scar near my collarbone. Can I ask you something? She whispered. Yeah. If she called tomorrow, said she wanted to try again, would you go back? I didn't answer right away. I could feel her breath catch. I don't know, I said honestly. She nodded. Fair. But if I did, I added, I think I'd spend every second wondering what I left behind. Rachel turned her face into my chest and said nothing. The fire crackled, and outside, the woods held their breath. The final morning at the cabin came too quietly. There was no dramatic thunderstorm, no aching argument, no dramatic regret. Just the soft clink of dishes as Rachel moved through the kitchen and the slow, inevitable unraveling of everything we'd wrapped ourselves in. I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the line where the fog met the trees. The fire from the night before had burned to white ash. My body still ached in the best ways, from hiking, from cold lake water, from the intimacy that never once felt cheap. I wasn't used to things that felt good also feeling doomed. Inside, I heard Rachel laugh faintly at something. A podcast maybe, or just herself. For a moment, I pretended it was ours. That this was normal. That we were just two people who took a weekend trip into the woods and found something rare and alive. Then my phone buzzed. It was almost comical, the way the signal returned like a ghost creeping up behind me. The bars lit up one by one. A single voicemail notification blinked at me from the screen. Emily. I didn't listen right away. I just stared at the name. It was like hearing someone say your own name after a long silence. Familiar. Jarring. Wrong. I stood, walking slowly back inside. Rachel was wiping the counter with a dish towel, her hair tied up, face clean and content in a way I hadn't seen since we arrived. Signal's back? I said, holding up the phone. She paused. So the spell breaks. I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything more. She walked over and took the phone gently from my hand. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She left a message? Yeah. Play it. I hesitated, but the look she gave me was steady. No jealousy. No fear. Just a kind of quiet permission. I pressed play. Emily's voice came through with a stutter of static and hesitation. Hey, I'm back in town early. I've been thinking. A lot. I know this break was my idea, but I think I made a mistake. I miss you. I miss us. Can we talk? When you're home. Please. The message ended. Silence fell heavy over the cabin. Rachel handed the phone back to me. Well, that's timing. I stared down at it. I don't even know how to feel. She didn't say anything. Just walked past me, picked up her half-packed duffel, and zipped it closed. You don't owe me anything, she said, not turning around. I knew what this was. That's not fair, I said. She paused. Isn't it? I stepped closer. What happened between us? Was real, she finished. I know. That's what makes this harder. She finally turned, and I saw it. The thing she tried to bury with her sarcasm and bluntness. The hurt, the fear, the hope. I reached for her hand. She let me take it. What do I do? I asked, voice low. Rachel gave a soft, sad smile. You figure out whether what you had with her is worth saving, or if it's just something you're afraid to bury. I nodded. What if I don't know yet? Then you'll hurt someone either way. We finished packing in silence. The drive down the mountain was longer than I remembered. The trees didn't feel like protectors anymore, just tall, quiet witnesses to everything we didn't say. Rachel played music softly, some folk band I didn't recognize. The lyrics were all about leaving and returning and things left unsaid. Of course they were. When we hit the edge of town, she pulled over near a gas station and turned to me. I'm going to take the car, she said. I'll crash at my parents' place a couple days, then figure things out. I nodded. Okay. She reached across and touched my cheek. You don't have to run back to her out of guilt, Nick. I'm not. She tilted her head. Aren't you? I didn't answer. She leaned in, pressed a kiss to my cheek, not on the lips. It was soft, slow, and somehow final. Then she opened the door and stepped out. I watched her disappear into the store. I didn't wait for her to come back. I just sat there for a while, alone, with the engine off, the voicemail playing over and over in my head. I think I made a mistake. I miss you. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. The door creaked open with that familiar whine. The one Emily used to say sounded like an old man groaning. For a brief second, I was back in time. 5 years ago, walking in with takeout and flowers after one of our stupid fights, hoping some pad thai and tulips would earn me a smile. This time, there were no flowers. Just my bag slung over my shoulder, my boots still dusted with pine needles, and a strange, hollow ache in my chest. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like home. Emily was in the kitchen. She turned as I entered, her hair pulled back, no makeup, wearing one of my old college sweatshirts like she used to. A carefully staged version of comfort. Hey, she said. Her voice cracked slightly. You're back. I nodded. Yeah. She stepped closer, slowly, unsure of her welcome. I didn't know if you'd get the message. I did. A beat passed. The tension in the room felt like a held breath, stretched thin. She reached for my arm, then seemed to think better of it. Can we talk? I shrugged off my bag and set it down by the door. Sure. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd told me she needed space. The same table where everything had started to unravel. The silence between us was louder now. I thought going away would help me figure things out, she began. And at first it did. I felt free, light. But then, I don't know, it just started feeling empty. I didn't speak. I wanted to hear it all. I kept thinking about you, she continued. About us. The way you'd look at me when you thought I wasn't paying attention. The way you always made coffee just right, even if you hated that I added cream after. Stupid things. She swallowed hard. I realized I'd been running from something I couldn't fix on my own. And I missed you, Nick. I really did. Her voice cracked again. I leaned back, folding my arms. Why didn't you say that before you walked out? She winced. Because I thought you'd fight me. Or worse, let me go without caring. I didn't fight, I said quietly. Because I was too tired. She looked down, ashamed. I'm sorry. For all of it. For how I made you feel invisible. I stared at her, trying to match this woman with the version of her I'd carried through the woods the last few days. Trying to remember how to feel what I used to feel. I needed that break too, I said. But not the way you think. She looked up. Her eyes searched mine. Did something happen? There it was. The question. I didn't answer. Not yet. Not then. Instead, I said, you said you missed us. But which part, Emily? The version of us from 5 years ago? Or the one where we barely touched each other? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I don't know. We sat in silence. She reached across the table, slowly, and took my hand. It didn't feel electric. It felt foreign. We tried, that first night, to pretend. We ordered dinner from our old favorite spot. She put on one of those indie playlists we used to listen to when cooking together. She poured us both a glass of wine and curled up on the couch next to me, head resting lightly on my shoulder. But it all felt staged, like we were playing roles we'd long since forgotten the lines to. That night, we lay in bed, the bed I hadn't touched in a week, side by side, clothes still on, backs to each other. At some point I heard her breath hitch, soft and quiet, and I knew she was crying. But I didn't turn around. The next morning, I woke before her. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the light was beginning to change. I walked through the house. Our house, in the early quiet. My feet knew the creaks in the floors, the soft spots in the carpet, the drawer that always stuck halfway. But nothing felt like mine anymore. The photo of us in the hallway. The books we bought together. Even the throw pillow she insisted matched nothing, but had to stay. It all looked like a museum exhibit now. Artifacts of a marriage that didn't exist anymore. When she came downstairs, she looked at me cautiously. Want breakfast? I'm not hungry. She lingered near the counter. I thought maybe we could take a walk later. Just talk. I nodded absently, but inside, I felt it growing. The realization I'd been avoiding. That it wasn't Emily I was mourning. It was the idea of her. The idea that we could go back to something that had been quietly dying long before either of us had the guts to admit it. Rachel didn't call. She didn't text. She vanished the way people do when they know staying would only make the goodbye harder. But I felt her absence like a bruise beneath the skin. Invisible, constant, and somehow still tender. Emily was trying. I could see it in the little things. Making my favorite tea. Wearing the perfume she hadn't used in months. Asking about my work like it mattered again. But every time she reached for my hand, I flinched. Every time she smiled, it felt like it was meant for someone she used to be. And every time I closed my eyes, it wasn't her I saw. It was Rachel. In the lake. By the fire. In my arms with nothing between us but breath and skin and the terrifying sense that something real had just happened. Something I might never feel again if I let it go. No return address. Just my name in Rachel's handwriting. The looping, slanted print I'd memorized without trying. It was the only thing in the mailbox that mattered. I stood in the driveway for what felt like a long time, the envelope soft in my hand, the air around me strangely still. I didn't open it right away. I knew what it was. Back inside, Emily was upstairs, probably on a Zoom call with her therapist, the third one this week. She was trying. I couldn't deny that. She was cooking again, planning weekend trips, offering to go to couples therapy. There were days when I almost believed we could make it work. And then there were days like today, when a simple envelope knocked the air out of me. I sat at the kitchen table and slid it open. The paper was thick, cream-colored, a page and a half, handwritten, no crossed outlines. She had taken her time with this. Nick, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. Not in the dramatic sense. I didn't vanish. I just left the state, packed what I could into my car, and drove west until the air started to feel new. I didn't write to say goodbye because you never asked for a hello. What happened between us wasn't planned, but it also wasn't an accident. I think we both knew, long before that kiss, that something was going to break. I just didn't expect it to be me. I meant what I said about feeling seen, about you making me feel like I mattered. I didn't come to the cabin looking for that. I came to get away from my own mess. Turns out we were both running from ghosts. When Emily called, I watched your face. I saw you flinch, saw the guilt pull your shoulders in. I knew you wouldn't choose me. Maybe not because you didn't want to, but because the idea of destroying something, even if it's already cracked, scares you more than being unhappy. I don't hate you for it. I don't hate her either. I just couldn't stay to watch you try to rebuild something that you already left the moment you touched me. You may not believe this, but I want you to be happy. Truly. Whether that's with her, or alone, or someday with someone else entirely. As for me, I'm starting over. Again. But this time, I'm not waiting to be chosen. I'm choosing myself. Thank you. For the cabin. For the firelight. For the truth. Don't come looking for me. If you do, it won't be the same. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time, my eyes stinging by the end of it. She hadn't begged. She hadn't asked me to leave Emily. She hadn't even blamed me. Somehow, that hurt more than if she had screamed in ink. I sat there for a long time, the house too quiet. The sunlight poured across the table, catching the edges of the page like a spotlight. My fingers curled around the letter like it was the last part of her I'd ever touch. And maybe it was. Emily came down the stairs eventually. She saw the paper in my hand and paused. What's that? I looked up slowly. It's from Rachel. She froze. Oh, I didn't elaborate. She didn't ask. Instead, she walked to the fridge and poured herself water, her back turned to me. The distance between us stretched again, not as wide as it had been, but wide enough. And this time, I felt no desire to bridge it. I took the letter upstairs and tucked it into the top drawer of my desk. Not hidden, exactly, but not on display. Some things aren't meant to be forgotten, but they're not meant to live out loud, either. The week that followed passed like fog. I went to work, came home, ate, slept beside a woman I used to know. We tried to talk one night, really talk, but everything felt like a chess game. Careful moves, avoiding landmines. I couldn't fake it. Not with her, not with myself. And the thing was, Emily could feel it too. I saw it in her eyes every time I drifted off during a conversation, or pulled away from a kiss that lacked the old rhythm. There was no anger in her, just resignation. We were pretending, but we both knew the stage was empty. On Saturday morning, I went for a drive. No destination, just the road and my thoughts. I passed gas stations and strip malls and quiet, winding back roads until I reached the overlook above the river. I parked and stepped out. The view was stunning. Hills blanketed in late summer green, the river gleaming below like melted silver. I sat on the hood of the car, pulled the letter from my jacket, and read it one more time. Not for clarity, not even for closure, but to remind myself that it had been real, that I hadn't imagined her hands on my skin or the sound of her laugh as we dried off by the lake, that someone had looked at me and wanted more than what was left of me. I folded the letter, slid it back into my coat, and stared out at the horizon. I didn't know what came next, but I knew it wasn't here, and it probably wasn't there, either, in the house where the air had stopped breathing a long time ago. Somewhere out there was the version of me that had felt alive again, and I wasn't sure I could live without chasing it. Emily's voice cracked the moment I told her. We were standing in the living room, a half-finished dinner cooling behind us on the table. I hadn't planned to say anything that night, but pretending had started to feel like a slow kind of suffocation, the kind where you don't realize how badly you're gasping until the air finally returns. I need to tell you something, I said. She turned toward me, hopeful. Yeah. My heart thudded once hard. At the cabin, something happened. Her smile faltered. Something? With Rachel. The silence between us collapsed into itself like a building. She blinked. Once. Twice. With my sister? Her voice came out small, disbelieving, as if she thought maybe she'd heard me wrong. I didn't flinch. Yes. Her face twisted, cycling through emotion faster than I could track. Disbelief. Hurt. Fury. Something close to betrayal, and something much colder than grief. Oh my God, she whispered. You slept with her? I didn't answer. You had sex with my sister? Still, I didn't speak. She backed away from me slowly, like I was radioactive. When? Was it how many times? I looked at the floor. It wasn't like that. Don't you dare, she snapped, voice sharp enough to cut bone. Don't you stand there and romanticize it. I raised my head. I'm not. But I'm not going to lie to you either. Tears were streaming now, but she wasn't sobbing. She wasn't breaking down. She was unraveling in slow motion, in that scary, precise way people do when they're done pretending it can be fixed. I asked for a break, she said quietly. I didn't ask you to destroy us. We were already destroyed, Emily, I said. You just gave it a name. She looked like she wanted to hit me, or kiss me, or both, but she did neither. Instead, she turned and walked out of the room. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't slam the door. She just left, without another word. And for once, I didn't follow, because there was nothing left to defend. I packed that night. A bag, just the essentials. A few clothes, my boots, the letter from Rachel. I didn't know exactly where I was going, or maybe I did. The road up the mountain was darker than I remembered. The trees pressed closer. The turns felt sharper. But I kept driving, because some part of me knew what I was chasing. Not a woman. Not even redemption. Just clarity. When I reached the old trailhead near the ridge, I parked and stepped out. The air was cooler now. The season was turning. My breath fogged in the air as I walked the familiar path. Each footstep felt louder than it should have. Each memory returned like a phantom. Rachel's laugh echoing through the trees. Her toes dipping into the lake. Her face illuminated by firelight. That small smile she gave me when she thought I wasn't watching. I reached the clearing just as the last light was disappearing behind the hills. The cabin stood exactly as we'd left it. Quiet. Waiting. I stepped onto the porch, hand on the doorknob. It creaked open, and there she was. Rachel, sitting cross-legged on the floor, her back to the fire, a worn paperback in her lap. She looked up, startled at first. Then she saw me, really saw me, and something in her expression cracked open. A breath, a smile. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. I stepped inside, heart pounding in my chest, hands trembling in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. She rose slowly, the book slipping to the floor. Her eyes never left mine. I wasn't sure you'd come back, she whispered. I wasn't sure either, I said. But the further I got from you, the more lost I felt. That was the truth. Raw, unfiltered. She stood there, hesitating for only a beat, then crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me. I buried my face in her shoulder, inhaling the scent of wood smoke and lavender and something that felt like home. We didn't kiss. Not yet. We didn't have to. We just stood there in the glow of the fire, our hearts beating the same rhythm again, the silence around us finally whole instead of empty. Because this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a betrayal. It was a beginning. One neither of us had expected. But maybe, the ones we don't expect are the only ones that ever really matter.